With every one of these Resident Evil reviews I do, I get one step closer to finally having to play Resident Evil 6 again. The growing fear and dread I feel within myself is incomprehensible and slowly eating away at me like an out-of-control sickness. I don't know how much longer I can hold out. I feel like I'm just days away now from forcing myself to slog through that nightmare. Speaking of fear, let's review Resident Evil Revelations 2, one of the franchise's sleeper hits and maybe secretly one of the best games in the franchise. Let's do this! Resident Evil Revelations 2 starts off with one of the worst in-game fictional advertisements I have ever seen. A promotional video for the anti-bioterror group TerraSave. Like, seriously, how are these guys taken seriously? This is the corniest, goofiest thing I think I've seen in the franchise that is supposed to be taken seriously, but okay, let's just ham it up. We are then introduced to two of the leading characters, Claire Redfield, a senior member of TerraSave, and Moira Burton, the eldest daughter of Barry Burton of Resident Evil 1 fame, and the newest member of the group. We see Claire and Moira socializing with other members, and then the proverbial crap hits the fan and an unknown armed group storms the building and takes everyone at the scene hostage. That escalated real fast. Claire and Moira wake up in a dark and dreary prison wearing a mysterious bracelet, but are free to walk around as the doors around them suddenly open, revealing a path out. Sadly, this place has seen better days, and just a brief moment later, our protagonist can hear screams of terror in the distance, find trails of fresh blood, and many, many dead bodies strewn about the place. Something seriously bad is going on down here. Claire picks up a discarded knife and Moira elects to be on flashlight duty as they work their way out of the prison before running headfirst into a screaming lunatic man who attacks Claire as he tries to move a shelf. Shortly after he runs off, we hear more screaming and encounter another member of TerraSave, Gina, as she dies in Claire's arms.
Little eyes.
With the death of Gina behind us, Claire and Moira stumble upon a deceased security guard and get his keys and gun. Moira is visibly shook at the sight of the gun and backs away from Claire and asks an important question.
You gonna use that?
It's more reliable than any person.
Hear that right there? That's Claire quoting Steve from Resident Evil Code Veronica. Clearly his death and their time together has had some effect on her in the years since then. It seems like Claire has hardened herself since then, which is great because the duo are suddenly attacked by several of the weird screaming men inhabiting the prison. They're fast, they're crazy, and they want our ladies here dead. Pushing past the crazies, Claire finds a shotgun and tells Moira she is going to need a gun as well. Moira objects to the idea, and Claire remembers Moira has some kind of gun trauma in her past and apologizes for bringing it up. Moira picks up a crowbar instead and opts to bash the bad guys' heads in instead. As the girls emerge from the depths of the prison, a woman's voice chimes in over their mysterious bracelets and speaks poetry to them and asks if they're afraid. Claire and Moira then search the area, solve some puzzles, get the power back up and running, and unlock the gear door blocking their only exit. At this time, all of the crazies in the prison are alerted to their position and storm them. Thankfully, someone left a giant flamethrower here to block the door. Outside at last, the voice on the girl's bracelet speaks up and reveals herself as the Overseer and instructs them to head to the Vosek. But first, Claire and Moira head to the nearby radio tower and attempt to get a message out for help. But either the radio is out or not strong enough to reach anyone for help. And then Claire realizes it. They are far from civilization and trapped out on some mysterious island. The first half of episode 1 ends. And now we find ourselves for the first time ever in the shoes of Barry Burton come to save his daughter Moira. Having received her message somehow, he docks his little boat on the beach and is suddenly confronted by a small girl, and after a brief conversation with her, he learns her name is Natalia and she doesn't know how she got here. Barry reluctantly agrees to take her along and heads inland to search for Moira. Barry reaches the prison the girls just escaped and encounters zombies wandering the halls. These weren't here earlier. Where did they come from? We also gain control of Natalia at this time and learn she can see things, enemies, and items through walls. Somehow, she can just do this. Very useful, but equally mysterious and slightly concerning. It looks like in the time between the distress call going out and Barry arriving, something happened and some areas of the prison have been damaged or destroyed, and he has to go around a side path to get to the radio tower where the broadcast is coming from. On the way, he enters a logging camp and encounters a terrifying enemy that is some patchwork humanoid creature with weapons and extra limbs grafted on. Barry remarks that it resembles the Ouroboros monsters seen in Resident Evil 5. Battling their way out of the logging camp, Barry makes a Resident Evil 1 reference and asserts his dad joke superiority as he and Natalia race to the radio tower.
Who's the master of unlocking now, huh?
Barry and Natalia reach the radio tower, and Barry finds the recording of Moira calling for help. He then reveals it is 6 months old. 6 months have passed between the first part of the game and Barry arriving here now. What happened that it took so long for him to get here? But before we can even begin to get answers, Natalia drops a bombshell on Barry.
Your daughter's name is... Moira?
Yeah. Why? Hey kid, you okay?
Moira. She's dead.
What?
The first episode ends, and we are left with a bone-chilling realization that Barry is far too late to save his daughter. So yeah, this is how the game plays out. The game is broken into 4 episodes, each with 2 separate parts. The first half is played as Claire and Moira, and the second half as Barry and Natalia 6 months later. You can play the Claire and Moira part first if you want by using chapter select between parts by quitting out before the Barry part starts, but it breaks the flow, and the flip-flopping story is how the developers intended us to view it. So if this way isn't to your liking, just know that if/when you play the game, you can play it in a way that makes everything line up rather than jumping between 2 different times. Back to the story, we once again take control of Claire and Moira, who have arrived at the Vosek. It's a bar. We meet up with 2 other members of TerraSave, Gabe and Pedro, who were also abducted from the party and got separated from a few other members who are presumed dead. Gabe leads us to a damaged helicopter he found, and Pedro managed to take apart one of the mysterious bracelets he got from a fallen comrade. We learn the bracelets are 2-way radios and that the Overseer can hear and talk to anyone wearing them. And speaking of the Overseer, she speaks up again and tells us that we have been injected with a virus and are all going to die. And then she sounds all the alarms in the area, alerting the monsters to our presence. Sadly, this is too much for our dear friend Pedro to handle, and the fear of being overwhelmed by the monsters activates his bracelet and the virus. We watch in terror as Pedro transforms into a terrifying monstrous version of himself, and Claire and Moira are forced to run for their lives until they are saved by one of the bosses of TerraSave, Neil. He drops a ladder down for us, and we manage to lock ourselves behind a giant metal door for extra safety before heading into the city. We fight our way past more deadly monsters before getting separated from Neil and encounter Natalia and her little bear friend Lottie. Thankfully, Moira rolled a higher charisma stat than Claire and is able to convince her to stay with us. Gabe then arrives in the helicopter only for the Overseer to remotely shut it down and cause Gabe's bracelet to activate as he spirals out of control and crashes into a building. And then Natalia gets grabbed by an unknown assailant, and Claire and Moira are once again on their own.
Claire? We lost the girl.
Back in the present with Barry and Natalia again, we find ourselves outside the Vosek and make our way to the tower off in the distance while fighting hordes of zombies, those freaky creatures, and a new invisible bug monster that can kill us in one hit if it touches us. As we catch up with Claire and Moira's trail at the end of the previous chapter of the game, we run into Monster Pedro, who has now sprouted some extra giant eyeball-shaped weak spots on his body. Good thing he has those now, because we have no choice but to kill him and get out of the city and into the mysterious Overseer's tower. At the tower, Barry and Natalia find a picture of Wesker.
Who? The woman here with Wesker?
That is Wesker.
And things just got a lot more complicated.
So you finally came. I knew you would.
Cutting back to Claire and Moira, we follow a note left behind by Neil and enter an abandoned factory and solve a bunch of puzzles and dodge some deadly traps while collecting parts of a human anatomy puzzle. Afterwards, we get access to a slaughtering house and are forced to engage in some bloody puzzles and fight back a massive horde of enemies before the Overseer decides to bring the entire building down on the girls. Escaping into the sewers below the city, Claire and Moira encounter a sick old man with a rifle who demands they leave his sewers before he opens the way for them. He doesn't seem hostile, so the girls just leave him alone and head out through the sewers and into the tower, where they encounter Neil. And it turns out Neil is a very bad guy. He's a former FBC member who helped get all of TerraSave captured and wanted to trade them to Alex Wesker for samples of the Ouroboros virus. Using the virus, he was going to enact random acts of terrorism and convince the world the FBC should be brought back. So, yeah, he's an idiot just like his boss Morgan, who thinks the way to stop bioterrorism is to cause more bioterrorism. Neil transforms into a hulked-out version of himself, and Claire and Moira do battle with him until he overheats and dies. And then he wakes up stronger and angrier and attempts to finish off Claire. But just in time, Moira conquers her fear of guns and steps in to save the day.
Oh my god! Moira! You're not supposed to be in here! How could you?
Dad's coming! Don't take it off!
Jesus! Go call an ambulance!
Moira! I don't want to tell no mom!
With Neil dealt with, we see a brief scene of Alex Wesker doing something to Natalia, and we cut back to the present-day Barry and Natalia, who are face-to-face with monstrous Alex Wesker, who laughs and taunts Barry before siccing the horde of monsters on them.
I'll kill you later.
Barry cuts a quick one-liner and escapes with Natalia. In the sewers below, we hear about Barry and Moira's falling out and how Barry accidentally left his gun safe unlocked, and a loaded gun easily reachable for young Moira to severely injure her sister Polly with. This all leads to a massive fallout between Barry and Moira, and one that may never be healed, as apparently Moira has died somewhere on this island at the hands of Alex Wesker. Barry then stumbles onto the deceased body of the old man Claire and Moira met, and he has Moira's phone.
Polly, it's me. I think this is the end. I wanted to tell you I love you. And Barry. Daddy. I'm sorry, I was the bad daughter.
No, you're not the bad one.
Barry.
I'm here. Let's go. I am gonna wreck this island for what it did to her.
We hear Moira's final words, and Barry resolves to destroy the island for what has happened to her. Barry then battles his way out of the sewers and into an old mining facility where they do battle with some of the game's worst enemies, before once again coming face to face with Alex Wesker. Barry is thrown aside and Alex moves in for the killing blow, but suddenly recoils in fear as she looks into Natalia's eyes. Back over at Claire and Moira one final time, the girls ascend Alex's tower and hear Alex's villainous monologue.
And then I will surpass him.
What are you trying to do?
Escape.
And then she dies. But before the girls have time to celebrate, the tower's self-destruct sequence activates and they have to make a mad dash for the exits. Sadly, the girls weren't fast enough and we see poor Moira get crushed beneath part of the ceiling, and Claire is forced to jump from the tower by herself as she begs for forgiveness. We then see a flashback from Barry and Claire's perspective as she is raced into the emergency care and Barry is left in the hospital to mourn the death of Moira.
No. Moira. Why, baby?
Snapping back to the present day, Barry awakens and finds Natalya is okay and Alex Wesker is missing. He cleans himself off and the two head back towards the tower, not noticing that Barry has dropped his BSAA badge. Barry fights off more monsters and heads through an underground mining facility that leads to a strange mansion. Barry remarks he's had his fill of mansions, and we get one of our very few jump scares in the game as Barry battles his way into the depths of the mansion in search of Alex. In the depths of the mansion, we find the deceased body of Natalya's dear friend Lottie. And we once again come face to face with Alex Wesker, who injects herself with a dose of Ouroboros virus as she curses Natalya and swears she will destroy her. Alex transforms into an even more monstrous and terrifying version of herself, and Barry is forced to fight for his life in an effort to bring her down. Sadly, Alex Wesker gains the upper hand, and it looks like our protagonists are done for.
Moira!
You did all this for me?
Yeah. Sorry it took half a year. Fucking technology.
Fucking right up the ass.
Moira is alive.
Oh,
Come on.
Oversee this, bitch.
Claire's here!
Fuck yeah!
Moira, I'm so sorry. You were in
And
trouble.
you came back with a chopper and a sniper rifle, and that's fucking awesome, so shut up!
Let me take care of this.
Are you sure you don't need me, Barry? I mean, Dad.
I'll always need you. But for now, I have this.
Everyone gets a killer one-liner. Let's kill this monster. Barry and Claire give Alex everything they've got and a one-way trip to hell, courtesy of our best friend, the rocket launcher.
Where's the big gun? Bring that shit out!
Time to put an end to this!
Barry emerges from the smoke of battle, and our heroes fly off into the sunrise. One big happy family. Resident Evil Revelations 2, story complete. Credits roll, and we see Natalya sitting in bed, now a member of the Burton family. Reading from the works of Kafka, just like Alex Wesker. The experiment was a success. Alex Wesker has successfully transferred her consciousness to Natalya and will live on to terrorize the world again. But that's a story for another time. Hopefully. As the successor to Resident Evil 6, gameplay-wise, Revelations 2 has some great gameplay improvements and some great quality of life stuff in it. We have better 8-way character movement, much more in line with modern shooters and action games of the time, a smoother inventory and interface, the return of item crafting, and a new 4-item shortcut system for our grenades and skills. But what's more noteworthy is the way Revelations 2 handles its co-op gameplay. Similar to the 2 previous games in the co-op department, you can play Revelations 2 solo with an AI teammate, online with a friend or random stranger, or locally with a second player. And this time around, they addressed the terrible AI of the previous games with one major change. When playing in single player mode, you can freely swap characters at any time. AI partner doing something stupid? Swap to them in an instant and get back on track. Pick up items, finish off that downed enemy, or help solve a puzzle the right way. It's such a novel idea, letting us play both characters at any given time. And what's more, it's such a smooth transition. Character swapping takes less than a second. When you hit the button, the game slows down and pans over to the other character before returning to normal speed, giving us time to react to whatever needs to be done. It might actually be better to play this game in single player because of this update. Playing with a friend is still super fun, but now it's just an option. You no longer feel like you're playing with a handicap while being solo. On top of this great AI improvement, we now actually have a proper dodge button. Resident Evil 6 had one, but it sucked. The Resident Evil 3 remake had one, but it was mildly useful at best. And the first Revelations had a dodge as well, but this version is the best of all of them. You hit the button and a direction, and you get some invincibility frames and move the hell out of the way. Along with the dodge button, all 4 playable characters are unique in some way. Claire and Barry have unique weapon sets and melee attacks, Moira is equipped with a crowbar she can use for close range combat and deadly finisher attacks, and her flashlight can blind enemies. Natalia can spot enemies as well, and she can see through walls. And oh yeah, the game now has stealth sections. Completely optional, but you can drop down to a crouch, sneak around behind objects, and get stealth kills on unaware enemies at certain points in the game. Great inclusion and a good ammo saving technique when you have the opportunity for it. But that's just the tip of the iceberg for gameplay. We have 2 unique DLC chapters to talk about, The Struggle and Little Miss. The Struggle tells a short story that covers how Moira survived for 6 months with the help of Yevgeny, the old man we encountered in the sewers with the rifle. The Struggle has several unique gameplay mechanics like a ration system used for continuing when you die, a limited animal hunting mechanic, a stealth-oriented chapter where you scavenge for ammo, a chapter where you have to hold your ground as enemies swarm your area, and the final mission where you learn Yevgeny's backstory and why he's on the island before Moira is forced to leave and survive on her own before the end of the game. And then there's Little Miss. Little Miss takes place a short while before Barry and Natalia first meet on the beach and is entirely a stealth-oriented chapter. You play as both Natalia and Dark Natalia. Yeah, that's her name. It's actually Alex Wesker invading her consciousness and slowly taking her mind over, which also somehow explains how she can see the monsters in the game. It's an interesting idea, but this chapter is entirely a stealth sequence, and getting spotted at any time immediately fails the chapter and you have to start over. But that's not all there is to Resident Evil Revelations 2. Returning from the first Revelations game is Raid Mode, but now it is way better and full of new content, in-depth character customization, and is much more fleshed out. There are dozens of levels and more difficulty options, a substantial amount of characters with unique skills and passives, and they bring in enemies and areas from other Resident Evil games to flesh out the experience. I could go on for hours about all the amazing stuff they added into Raid Mode in this game, but I'll keep it brief. Every character now levels independently, has at least one unique skill or passive, gains weapon slots, passives, and skill slots at different rates, and each offers a unique style of gameplay from each other character. For example, Moira only starts with one gun slot, but has a bunch of really good passives to make up for it. She gets extra ammo drops, has improved melee damage, and has extra starting grenades. Other characters like Barry, Chris, and Hunk have way more weapon slots, but unlock their unique skills and passives way slower. And don't worry about picking a character to main in this game. Every single character's skills and passives can be unlocked and inherited by every other character in the game. Just spend a couple hours power leveling a character and everyone can scavenge for ammo like Moira, get bonus ammo for magnums like Barry, or pack a rocket launcher like Chris. And there's no level cap. You can level indefinitely until you have everything on one character. Resident Evil Revelations 2 is bar none one of the best Resident Evil games in the franchise. It has an interesting story, a unique villain that will likely return in the future and threaten the world again. The game has fantastic pacing, doesn't rely on jump scares, has new and unique enemies, and the best character interactions in the entire franchise. Claire and Moira have a sisterly dynamic, with Claire being older, stronger, and more in control of her emotions, and Moira is now more comical, brash, and open with her emotions, giving into fear, distress, and emotional outbursts. Barry is a hardened and aging old veteran of the franchise who's out to save his daughter and kick the crap out of anyone in his way. He's serious and driven, but as the story goes on, his hard exterior breaks away and we get to see how much he cares and loves for the people around him, like Moira and Claire. All of the protagonists in this game are the best written and realized versions of any character in a Resident Evil game. It helps that two of them were established in previous games, but they get even more fleshed out in this game. The episodic nature of the game also helps break up and better pace the game. Claire chapters tend to be more horror themed with faster and deadlier enemies, less resources, and Barry chapters are more action heavy with slower enemies and less puzzles. And raid mode is nearly its own game this time around. It's so well done and fun, I would sacrifice future story-driven Resident Evil games to get a third installment of raid mode with more features and built more like a fully featured game, like something akin to Monster Hunter, Diablo, Warframe, or even Destiny. Dear Capcom, bring raid mode back. Hell, make it its own game. A fully featured, loot-driven, grindy, Resident Evil-inspired open-world game will be one of the best things you could do with your time. Resident Evil Revelations 2 gets a 10 out of 10. It's one of the best games in the franchise, a solid experience with the most original content, characters, and story in the game. It has the best secondary content in the franchise in the form of the infinitely replayable raid mode, and I can find no faults in this game. If you're a Resident Evil fan that missed this game, pick it up. If you like horror games, pick this game up. If you want a game that you can grind out loot in and level characters in for hours at a time, pick this game up. I cannot think of a single reason to not play this game if you have the option to. Stop what you're doing right now, clear a few hours of your time, and check out Resident Evil Revelations 2. Oh, I just had the most amazing dream. I was back in Resident Evil Revelations 2. Oh, well, I may as well get up now, I guess. Huh? Babe, where'd you go? Where'd you... No! 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 Not you! Anyone but you!